Hello, everyone. This is Alejandro Granados, the Vice President for Public Relations at ASHA's Hispanic Caucus. I'm joined today by our President, Sofia Carias, and we are going to hear about her in honor of Women's History Month. We'll hear from Sofia and her experience and get to know her a little more. So, Sofia, welcome. Thank you for agreeing to being spotlighted for Women's History Month.
You're very welcome. It's my pleasure. It is my pleasure. Thank you.
So I just wanted to start off by asking you about what is bringing you joy in these difficult times?
That is a good question, Alejandro. That is a good question because we need a little more joy right now. We could all use a little more joy. It's been quite a hectic year. Right now, what has always brought me joy, and especially now, is my family, my dear familia. They always bring me joy and support. My good friends, and my boyfriend Ryan. That is what gives me a lot of joy right now, is the support system that I have. They're amazing. So they bring me a lot of joy. We do Zoom meetings. We do try to do some Zoom things with family too. It's been, our iPhones have FaceTime.
Yeah.
So, we try to be creative about how to see our family. So you just have to be creative to be with the people that you love right now. So.
Yeah. Well, speaking of family, one question that I would like to hear from you about is, being the president of the Hispanic Caucus. Can you talk about your connection to the Hispanic Latinx
Absolutely.
community?
I am Salvadorian. I was born in El Salvador. And my family immigrated to the United States when I was 5. I came here when I was 5. I'm a little too old to be considered a dreamer. The cutoff is like 36, I think, or 35 for the dreamers. But I am a dreamer. My parents brought me here looking for a better life. I grew up here in Los Angeles. I grew up bilingual and bicultural. So I have some deep roots in the Salvadorian community and here in the Hispanic community in Los Angeles. So Spanish was my first language. I learned English in kindergarten, so I'm a sequential bilingual. So when we work with the kids and I can apply, it was my personal experience to learn one language and then learn a second language. So I can apply that to the communities that we work in. So.
Do you work with that population now? Can you tell us about what setting you work in?
I do. I've worked in the public schools for 20 years. I've done other settings in the summer when the schools are out. I've worked in nursing homes, early intervention. I've worked in the hospitals, but my main job for 20 years has been the public schools. Like those kids, those immigrant kids, those English language learners. That's been the bulk of my 20 years has been with that population. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, taking maybe a few steps back, because I feel like a lot of people have a story. This isn't really a profession that a lot of people know about. So how did you come into this profession?
I started my college career in a different major. I was a radio broadcasting person. I did not start my career as a speech pathologist. I wanted to be on the radio. That was my dream here in LA. I love radio. I love broadcasting and communication. So that was what I studied when I first went to college. I was like, this is what I'm going to do. It's really hard to break into the biz in LA. Everybody here in Los Angeles is in the biz. Everybody is. And it's hard to break into radio. And what I saw for myself was not playing Mozart at 4 a.m., for people who can't sleep. I wanted to be big and famous. And so I started to look for a different career that would give me money, that would actually be a job and a career that I could do. I didn't want to spend my time going from gig to gig, trying to break into the business. I got disillusioned with that pretty quick. It wasn't what I wanted to do. So I looked for other professions in the bubble of communication. And I found speech pathology. I had never heard of it. I think I had heard physical therapy, maybe speech therapy, but I had not been familiar with it. So I discovered the profession and I took my first class as an undergrad, Introduction to Communication Disorders, as an undergrad, and I was hooked. That was it for me. I was like, this is what I want to do. So now I've spent the bulk of my life helping other people tell their stories. Instead of talking at people, now I talk with people and I help them tell their own stories instead of just telling my own story. So that's what I did with my radio background. I can still incorporate it. There's still a lot of ways that I do it for fun now. I still do, I did voiceover acting for a little while. I did voiceovers and I tell stories. I'm a storyteller here in LA. And so I still do these outlets to do with communication because it's still my first love, If anybody out there wants to check it out, it's storysalon.com. You can find me on storysalon.com, and it's just a group of storytellers that have been in LA for probably 20 some years now. And we tell stories at right now, it used to be at a coffee shop in North Hollywood, and now we're at an art gallery. We tell stories inside the art gallery, and we've gone virtual now. So if anybody wants to check out the stories and hear me tell stories, it's storysalon.com.
Oh, great! I'll definitely put it in a text. A really
yeah,
big
it's really great stories. Yeah. They're all personal. They're all personal narratives, and for adults only. They're not kid. It's not kids time. They're adult stories. Yeah, they're adult stories. So it's really fun. So if you guys want to check that out, that's what I do for fun. That's my outlet. It's my creative outlet.
I was going to ask, maybe we can use these for our teletherapy with our elementary preschool age kids, but no, do not.
Yeah. It's adult. No, it is adult storytelling, and a lot of the people who do the Story Salon are also in the biz. They're writers and actors around, and they're just practicing their craft.
You mentioned that you did voiceover work. Can you tell us more about that?
I tried. I had went on some auditions to do voiceover work because I love radio. And then I started studying speech pathology, so that my life went in a different direction. But I went on a few auditions. I made a CD of different voices that I can do. And I went on some auditions to do voiceover. I never got a gig to do it, but it's something I tried out to be the spoon in a Baskin Robbins commercial. I tried out to be the spoon. There's a lot of voiceover work out there if you're willing to, again, to kind of put yourself out there and do that gig work, So I never really went anywhere. I went on a few auditions. I think I had a McDonald's commercial that I auditioned for.
Well, thank you for telling us about your roadmap to speech language pathology. I'm wondering what advice you have for women of color or Latinx Hispanic women thinking about joining the profession.
I would advise to, that you're needed. We need your voice. We need your unique set of talents. Like you said, sometimes people may not have the traditional set of talents. To be a speech pathologist, what you think of maybe, this is a speech pathologist, Sometimes we need a wider variety of talents in our profession. So my advice would be, we need you. We need your voice, we need your gifts, and to not give up. If this is something that interests you, please pursue it. We need you. So hopefully, come on back.
Sort of related to that, but I'm wondering what advice you have for people who are already in the profession, but maybe struggling with these feelings of inadequacy or feeling like they're imposters.
Yeah, I've heard that a lot recently about imposter syndrome. You don't belong here. This isn't for you and you don't belong here. And the first thing I would say was that those feelings are lying to you. Don't listen. You are cared about and you belong here. So don't listen, because those feelings are lying to you, first of all. And second, I would give similar advice that I give to somebody seeking our profession, is that you're needed and your voice is really wanted here. We don't have enough representation of, women of color in our profession. So you are very needed. Your voice and your talents are very much needed here. So I would say to not listen to that voice because it's a liar.
Can you talk about what are the values that you hold that guide your professional or maybe even personal decisions as you go through life?
I would say, I think a big value that guides what I do is equity. I think that children they shouldn't have to fight for a free and public and appropriate education. I think that equity is really important when it comes to education and access to healthcare. Those things to me are basic human rights, education and healthcare. I think it's really important that we all have a fair shot at education and to healthcare. I think that guides a lot of what I do. Advocacy is also really important to me, to not advocate for those kids I just mentioned, but also to advocate within our profession, with our colleagues. I think Maya Angelou said, when you know better, you do better. So getting the word out about equity and what's needed in our profession to our colleagues, to the people that are actually working with those kids. I think that's a big deal too. I think equity and advocacy guide a lot of what I do. So.
Can you talk about what kind of work with equity and or advocacy that you've done in the field of speech language pathology, or maybe even outside of it?
I've spent a lot of my career presenting at conferences and getting involved with professional organizations. Thus, now I'm the president of the Hispanic Caucus. I was always an active member of the caucus. I was always an active member of my state organization. Wherever I could plug myself in order to educate, in order to learn more, to take it back to my colleagues, I think I've done a lot of presenting to our colleagues. And just becoming involved at the state and at the national level to help advocate for laws that help us too. like to help advocate for school districts and for our districts where I work to do the right thing a lot of the time with these kids. So within my own job too, I advocate a lot for the kids during meetings, during policy issues when things come up about policy in the district, like about, hey, maybe the kids should do this instead of this. Like you're not treating the kids in an equitable way. So I think taking action by presenting and being involved in organizations does a lot to help. Yeah. And also translating, I do a lot of translating for families to help in their access to education and help in their access to healthcare. Because my parents, I grew up translating for my own parents. I know what that struggle is. I know what that struggle looks like. And when I see these families that I work with, those are my parents, like those are my parents. And I think that the translating, like being able to communicate, them communicating what their needs are and understanding what this whole education and IEP is all about. And I think people assume that you can translate because you speak another language. Translating is a whole world of, you need to gain skills. It just doesn't, you don't just open your mouth and translate for people. It's a skill that you have to work at, even though you're bilingual. It's a skill to translate.
Being that it is Women's History Month, I was wondering if you could talk about the women who inspire you to do the work that you do.
I have a few women. To me, the first women, my grandmother and my own mother, have always inspired me to do hard things. Like, because my grandmother and my mother immigrated here from a different country, from El Salvador, and they had to rebuild their lives in a whole new place with kids in tow. That takes a lot of perseverance and a lot of hard work. And so my work ethic definitely comes from my grandma and my mommy. Their work ethic is in me. So that guides what I do. I had my first mentor in my graduate career, undergrad. I met Hortensia Kaiser as an undergraduate at New Mexico State University. She was the first Latina I ever met in this profession. She taught at New Mexico State when I was there as an undergrad, and that's where I met her. And again, I had never seen, she was the first person I'd seen myself in this profession. I saw myself in her for the first time. And even through my graduate career, she was an important part of my graduate career, even though we weren't at the same university anymore. Her pride and her passion in being Latina is infectious. And her advocacy for those children and the communities that she worked for was just awe. It was awe-inspiring, and it was very much shaped who I am as a professional. That again, I saw myself reflected in her as a professional, and I've had other mentors since her, but she's the first, and she holds a special place in my career and in my heart. She'll always hold a special place for me. So, yeah. And Oprah Winfrey, because I love Mama O a lot, and her advocacy for education, and just everything. I grew up watching Oprah, and I can't help but be inspired by her as a woman. And I would have followed her on a campaign if she had ever decides to run. So there you go. So those are the women that influence me the most right now.
Great. Is there anything that you want to share with the caucus, with the viewers, either about yourself or just like any words that you'd want to share that I haven't touched on?
I think that's something I've said to you recently in a meeting, and something that I try to think about, because change is hard. Change is difficult for people, for institutions, for countries. Change is just difficult. And I use that quote a lot about the wheels of justice turn slowly. They do turn, they just turn slowly sometimes. And so to keep fighting the good fight is what I would advise. And remember that things happen, it's a process. It's hard to go from point A to point B and nothing in between. We want a more idealistic things that we want, but we have to start somewhere. So my advice, again, was to remember that things move slowly sometimes, but that doesn't mean that you're not doing the right thing, that we shouldn't fight the good fight. That would be my advice to people, just to keep that in mind.
Well, thank you very much for agreeing to being interviewed and sharing about your life and sharing about really just your expertise and your experience, not just in speech language pathology, but also in advocacy and issues around equity.
It's my pleasure. I love this field. I love what I do. So it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.